In this video, we are going to cover in detail the nuance and the whys behind the development and the current form of the warm-up for the force board and for pitch 6. The information and how it came about is still in its infancy, for sure. I don't have thousands of climbers to test nor high-grade peer-reviewed information, but we do have good information and educated assessments that led me to put this thing together and also allow it to be really flexible for you. The current version of the app and so forth has it gonna read a certain way, but watching this video before you actually do the warm-up should give you the confidence to be flexible, not only with how you choose to do what you do, but how you choose to do it day 1 versus day 4, maybe a couple months from now when you're different and stronger and adapt. So let's go into warm-up part 1, the muscle and tendon version of it. The goal of this warm-up is A, to feel less stiff. We all know those times we're coming in like, I just don't want to work hard. It doesn't feel good to work hard. Getting our body moving is going to get fluid and our temperature going, and our joints are just going to be happier to move through space, but also to work hard. We are also going to increase our muscular recruitment. Now, this word gets pushed around a lot. The idea behind muscular recruitment is we have a whole lot of stuff that we are capable of tapping into, but on your first pull versus your warmed up pull, the numbers and the effort you can give and the force you can give should go up. That's telling us that we are now using more or a higher percentage of our total possible muscle in the effort. That is why there's a gradual increase in intensity, because we have to meet the demands of maybe we just woke up or we're just getting going, but it has to get pretty high if you want to give your muscles and your brain a reason to allow you to use a lot of your muscles. And that comes from two things. That's going to come from the getting up to a high percentage of our effort, but also the contraction types that we use that allow us to have a little bit more muscle-y involvement and stimulation than maybe a total tissue tolerance, connective tissue involvement, which we'll get into in a little bit. Third goal is also to prime the connective tissue. So the important things when it comes to sports in general is you need to be able to produce force, so squeezing, and you also need to be able to accept force or absorb force. So maybe you hit the gas on, your shoulder kind of gives, or you dead point and you connect, and there's a little bit of that there. The more readily available you are to accept and absorb force safely, good things happen. Very analogous to landing on one leg, landing on a box jump, jumping up, catching a dyno. You need to be able to accept force, which is a combination of also producing, but priming the connective tissue to be ready and to coordinate the ability to accept that force so you can do so safely. So that's where we get into the ending, where we get into some yielding isometrics, because that should be asking more of our total system, muscle and connective tissue, in ways that is going to be of more of this force absorption, dead pointing, where the fingers are getting slightly opened, but you're resisting it, rather than completely using more muscle to create force. So that's the goal of the muscle and tendon warm-up. Now, what does it look like? In the app, it's going to look like 2 sets, 5 seconds on, 10 seconds rest at increasing percentages of your, initially, an overcoming isometric. So an overcoming isometric in the edge form is going to be when we are going to try to use our fingers only. In our courses, we tell everyone, hey, you're a stone statue with moving fingers. We don't want to use our legs, our shoulder, or anything else to help assist force generation, because then we're going to tap into the different contraction type, which has different reasonings and adaptations. So in the edge, what we're trying to do is go from about, that was 90, maybe about 100 or so, fix that position, and then just imagine shaking someone's hand, just trying to squeeze their hand, just trying to squeeze into the edge. We are curling in that direction, but we're not going through full range of motion. So we're gonna set it up so that when you squeeze, you get maybe 5 or 10 degrees of motion, and that's about it. Bonus tip is using an unlevel edge. Why? Shameless plug for Specialized Masochism, amazing edge. But when we optimize each finger, we also optimize the level of force production potential. Why is that good? Because again, we're trying to increase our recruitment. So if we only have 3 fingers that are in, and then a pinky that's way down there, that is a whole section of muscle that is left untapped that we can't bring to the table now when we go to the wall. But if I get into an unlevel edge, and now all the fingers are happy, and they all can work really hard, I get more of this to wake up, which is gonna increase my recruitment, which is gonna be more force that you get to bring to the wall, to squeeze hard and to climb hard, right? Also gonna be important for the endurance section as well. So an unlevel edge is gonna be that advantageous. Can you use a flat edge? Sure, I don't care. But this is gonna make things a lot nicer. So priming the connective tissue and going up. 2 sets, 5 seconds on 10. So when we talk about the overcoming ISO, to get the most out of this warm-up, you're gonna wanna know the difference between your O-ISO, overcoming ISO max, versus your yielding max. To test those 2 different maxes, we're going to simply, you can set up using force board platform. How we would do this, you lock it in, right? To test the overcoming, again, you're a stone statue with moving fingers. I want to squeeze my knees, freeze my body, and the only thing I'm doing is just a subtle squeeze. Subtle squeeze. Maximally, that is going to be your high number. To get the other version, we need to act on the fingers. Because the difference between an overcoming isometric, again, this squeezing or active effort into something, and a yielding isometric, the fingers are resisting being opened. A yielding isometric in this fashion can be analogized to like a negative or an eccentric. So imagine you're at the top of a pull-up and you're slowly going down. You're resisting that change in motion, distance through space, and gravity. And here, the edge is going to be pushing up on your fingers, and your fingers are going to be resisting that change. So the action is on the fingers rather than the fingers acting on the thing. What is the thing? We can set this up overhead, toss our fingers into an edge, and pull down with our larger muscles. That pulling down will push into the fingers and get some numbers. Or on this, we can just switch our position. So instead of being here, now you are a stone statue with moving legs. So I will lock into my position, and I'm gonna use my legs to try and open up my fingers, but my fingers are gonna resist to the best of their ability. Now do this slowly, make sure you kind of know what you're doing progressively when you're doing this. Don't just jump into your fingers, I don't recommend that. That is the mechanism for some injury risk. But starting overhead, pulling down as hard as you can in the traditional finger testing way is gonna show you that number. What is that important? Because this number, this one, or this one, is gonna be a lot higher. Why? It's because we're getting more of the sum of our total tissue connected. The muscles are working, but when we act on those fingers, our connective tissue gets involved too. It's like pulling on a rubber band. As soon as I pull on that thing, it wants to pull back, and that passive force is still gonna add to the sum of our abilities. But when we take that outside resistance out, and it's just our fingers, we get something that is more muscular, which is why the number is gonna drop down a little bit. That is the percentage that we're gonna use. So when you test your curl or squeeze, we're gonna take 50% of that. So about 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, Squeezing at 50%, rest for 10, do it again, and then switch hands. Or you could go 5, 5, 5, 5. Here's the thing, your fingers don't care. Could you do 4 seconds? Sure. Could you do 6 seconds? Sure. Doesn't matter because we're in this really easy realm. We're just getting the fingers going. 30 seconds rest. For an advanced climber, you can probably rest a little less because it's not that hard. Then we're just slowly increasing the intensity. So we do the same thing, but now it's at 70%. We rest. Now it's at 80%. Now this is where like the actual 30 seconds rest probably comes into handy. And then that 80 and 90, we are really trying to wake up our fingers. As we get higher up, realistically, the amount of time you're working is probably gonna be around like 2 to 4 seconds, because as intensity increases, the amount of time, the duration of the exercise should decrease because of fatigue. We can't work really, really, really hard for 10 or 15 seconds. It just won't allow itself. You're gonna get tired. So it'll be naturally, it'll decrease. So from 50 to 70, maybe even into the 80s for some people, 5-ish seconds, totally fine. 6, 7, doesn't matter. But as we get from 80 to 90 in our harder efforts, a good 3-second squeeze is where we're going to be maximizing our muscular recruitment. At that point, you should feel like, wow, I could shake someone's hand and destroy it. Going into the next thing, we're going to drop down the intensities again, but we're using different intensities. So now that we're going into the yielding isometric, you're going to take 60% of the overhead pull or the leg-based pull, which is going to involve more of the total tissue system that is contributing to that resistant ability. From there, 60%, again, it's gonna say 5 seconds, but 2 to 3 seconds, just enough that we can start to pull on those fingers and get the connective tissue primed and ready and coordinated to be able to absorb some force and to be really comprehensive with our finger muscle strength. So, ends on about 80%. I don't really believe in going way higher than that for training or for warming up. So about 1 to 2 reps, 3 to 5 seconds at that 60 and 80 with that 30 or so seconds rest. Now you should be ready to like slap to something and be like, yeah, I could latch on. That's the goal of this. That's how you should feel. We are ideally, again, using unlevel and large edges. Again, we want to maximize effort and comfortability so that we get the most out of this ready. Let's say we were just strength training and bouldering or something like that. We could be pretty good to go. After this, it's not going to be in the app, but maybe you might go, I'm going to have some full crimps on my project, or I'm doing a pockets. Then you would go do some light hangs or pulls, do some pulling on a small edge, like a tension edge or something like that, to prime that specificity for your fingers to like, all right, I'm ready to experience some full crimps, or I'm ready to experience some pockets, that kind of thing. But that stuff that really looks like rock climbing is not the goal of this warm-up. The goal of the warm-up is to be very general, very slow to intense, slow to fast, general to specific, and then ramping up of that intensity. Because if we jump right to rock climbing, or we jump right to the full crimps and whatnot, we reduce the ability to ramp up and get all of these benefits of the muscle and tendon workout. The other goal of a warm-up is to hit these things with reducing the amount of fatigue. We are not in climbing or sending mode when we are warming up. Therefore, we should be choosing, how do I feel better, wake up my muscles and tendons with accumulating the least amount of fatigue possible. That way I don't rob myself of performance before I even get to the wall. That is also why we are going to choose the particular overcoming isometric in the majority of the efforts, because when you're just doing a subtle squeeze, there's less fatigue accumulation than when we are high force, high muscular tension. That heavy stretch is going to induce more fatigue mechanisms by inducing more calcium ion accumulation. We're getting into the weeds a little bit, but we don't need that right now. Our project's gonna give it to us. We just want to wake up the muscles in the least fatiguing way possible, the definition of a warm up and not set. So that is the strength and tendon section of the warm up. Now, if you're bouldering or you have some short, minimal move problems, probably good to go. Also a really good warm-up before finger training or some training on the wall. If your boulder is long, or we are definitely going on to ropes, this is where warm-up part 2 comes in. Warm-up part 2 is all about increasing our endurance capabilities. The goal, increase available energy. We used this device to help me study this. This is the NOx unit. And the NOx unit is going to show us 2 cool things. It's going to show us the relative muscle oxygen in and under the fingers, as well as, for the sake of definitions, blood flow going to the area. Why is this important? Because at any given time, your body's going to have X amount of gas in the tank. Where it is depends on many factors, but it's going to be somewhere in the midline. Before you go and perform and go on this long road trip, you should probably fill up your tank, because the distance between where this tank is and empty and this one and empty is different. This means you fail quicker, and if you were to fill up your gas tank before you go to perform, you would fail less quicker, right? So we want to show up to our project not with a low gas tank or climbing or anything like that, but with more gas in the tank. Now you're not going to get up to 100, that's not the point, but we want this line. How do we do that? We ramp up intensity, but we also make sure that we do it very muscularly, because muscle oxygen is dependent upon the muscles being stimulated. Your brain going, hey muscles, you got work coming. I don't know what it is, but we got to prime you to do these things. Widening the cardiovascular roads is going to be goal number 2. How do we do that? We need to get blood flow into the forearms. Now, there's a common misconception-ish about avoiding the flash pump before you go and climb and whatnot. Now, I think the definition of that flash pump is this full, painfully aching thing where your fingers go numb and you feel like your forearms are going to explode. I would agree that's probably not the best thing to do before we go climb. However, we do need to get a pump going on, because a pump is blood flow going into the forearms, which is going to tell the body and the muscles, hey, we need to be able to get blood in and out. These tiny roads right now are not going to work. We need to dilate the blood vessels. We need to get them a little bigger so that we can be more efficient with our energy transport. Because you don't fall off because you get pumped or blood flow goes in. You fall off because you cannot transport energy to and from efficiently. So if we can improve and prime that energy transport efficiency before we get on the wall, that means you have more distance already that you are not capable of than if you just jumped on the wall right away. How do we do that? Again, playing around with different assessments and things, and I still have plenty of studying to do, so this might change. But for now, the arrows are pointing at a very intermittent, muscular or overcoming isometric version of this. And Dr. Tom Nelson has studied this and talked about this for a very long time, and so we're just adding more layers of information to this, which I love. So, what is going on here? This is 5 seconds on, 2 seconds off, for about 10 to 15 reps. Now, could you do 4-1, 7-3, 4-12? Sure. Again, your fingers don't care. One of the biggest things is that your fingers do not prefer protocols. They prefer particular intensities, durations, and a good reason for what they're doing. So, the 2 things I tested were a 5-2 by X versus a 30-second by X. And the biggest blaring thing that came was that the more intermittent we can get, so an easy on or a shorter on, off for a duration, it stimulates more blood flow, because on the NOx unit, we had more blood flow showing up as compared to 30-second hold, let it go, 30-second hold, and whatnot. So as long as you're doing something intermittent for a good duration at a moderate intensity, you're doing a good thing. Now, if you're climbing a super pitch, like 150 feet or whatever, maybe this goes up a little bit. If you have a 30 to 40 foot pitch, it goes down a little bit. 50 to 60%, because depending upon who you are, you might be more genetically gifted than the person next to you. So you might have to work at a little bit more intensity, where maybe if you're like me and a little bit more bouldery, I can get enough out of lower intensity. Because again, we don't want to be sending. We're not sending here, we're warming up. So this is all sub-maximal. Intensity, duration, and that. So the protocol is 1 round, squeeze, 5, 4, okay. Repeat for 10 to 15 reps, whatever kind of makes sense for what you're climbing, at a low to moderate intensity. This is going to further push up this blue line and really get this blood flow going, more so than this will. That's another thing that showed up with the testing. And again, why do we choose the overcoming? It promotes more blood flow because it is more muscular. When I use, and the athletes that we've tested, the same in relative intensities, but we use a yielding isometric because the connective tissue gets involved. And because we work at higher relative numerical intensities, muscle tension increases and it kind of occludes and tightens up around the muscle. And so blood flow can't really get in and it gets stuck, which is where that like flash pump sensation comes, because you always get it when you're on the wall and you go on a route and you bite off more than you can chew and you get lost and pump falling. You're like, oh God, because you're hanging on for dear life, muscle tension's high, blood gets stuck. That's the thing that we're trying to avoid until we get onto the wall. So, which is why we choose something that promotes more blood flow, because it is more muscular, rather than getting muscle tension so high, making blood hard to get in. We don't want that, because the more blood gets in, the more the highways are going to widen, and the more our energy transport potential is going to go up. Also, the more energy we're going to be able to pack into our gas tank. And again, less fatigue. So we get all of these beautiful effects at a low fatigue cost. Your gas tank is full, your force is high, your connective tissue is ready to go, you've got a lot of blood flow, you've got wide highways to transport all this energy to and from, you're ready to go. Now you can jump on the wall and hope your skills are good enough. But at least you go into the climbing session, the training session, in a better position. You're you're maximizing your potential for success, rather than winging it, just jumping on the wall, losing skin, getting flash pump because you started climbing here rather than climbing here, and so forth. So again, I want to emphasize this is in its infancy, very subject to change as we learn more, very individual. You can play around with these. The goal is do more squeezes or overcoming isometrics or curls, just a little bit of the yielding things, just enough to prime the connective tissue, increase your intensity slowly over time. Same thing here. Make sure you don't feel wrecked, but your force numbers are going up, which you will see on the force board, which is nice. At the end of the warm-up, if your numbers didn't increase, it didn't recruit, right? If you didn't feel good, tissue. And then, if you're rope climbing or you have a long distance to travel, we want to get more blood flow in. Now, the force board isn't going to tell you that. You're going to need one of these guys to tell you that. But trust us-ish for now. We're doing our studies and we like what we see about how well we can fill up your gas tank and increase your ability to flow blood. And then again, in ways that are least fatiguing. Try a 7-3, try a 5-2, do 10 reps, do 15 reps, right? You should not feel overly wrecked, but you should feel like there's some blood flow going in there. And then when you hop on the wall, you'll be like, oh wow, I feel like I'm not getting flash pumped so quickly, right? So let me know if you have any questions. Please feel free to reach out to me to my Instagram or my email. It will be attached to this video. And I will help you better understand if you need to make any adjustments or slight tweaks to this. But this thing, I think it adds like 10 or 15 minutes, 2 minutes per arm. So within 15 total minutes, finger-wise, physically, you should be really ready to go. You can mix in some other things and stretch, whatever. That's on you. That'll be maybe another video. But for now, this is the warm-up. This is the why. And if anything changes and this thing and more studies that we do tell us differently, we will be the first ones to let you know hey, we're going to change things up and we are doing this now because new information has come out. And we want the best information for you to climb hard, climb happy, and also climb healthy. Could be a slogan, but not as good as the donut!